There's a space where I should have been in every family photo. A blank spot, a missing face. But today, that same face is on the cover of Forbes. And the people who erased me, they can't look away. Growing up, I thought love meant being included. But my family had a different rule. If the picture was perfect, I wasn't in it. Birthday parties, holidays, graduations. My spot was always behind the camera, never in the frame. I didn't understand why. Was I not good enough? Not worthy of being remembered? Years later, I realized something. They weren't just cutting me out of photos. They were cutting me out of their story. But stories can be rewritten. If you've ever felt invisible, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's ever been erased. Being excluded isn't just about a missing photo. It's about the message it sends. You don't belong. And when you hear that enough, you start to believe it. The first cut. It happened on a Thursday. The school auditorium buzzed with parents clutching cameras, eager to capture their kids' first play. I was 7, cast as a tree, no lines, just standing there in a brown paper costume. But to me, it was everything. After the performance, my mom gathered my brother and sister for a photo. I remember the way my chest swelled as I stepped toward them, still in my crinkly tree outfit, leaves taped to my sleeves. Then it came, the sentence that would echo for years. "You're better at taking pictures, honey. Hold this." She pressed the camera into my hands and turned away. The flash went off. Their smiles froze perfectly without me. I told myself it made sense. My brother had a solo. My sister played the lead. But deep down, a seed planted itself. Being behind the camera was my role. Not because I chose it, but because I didn't fit the frame. Later, flipping to the photo album, I saw the evidence. Page after page of them. Birthdays, vacations, ordinary Sundays. All with the same empty space where I should have been. That school play photo became a metaphor I couldn't escape. Always part of the scenery, never part of the memory. Years later, I'd understand the power of that moment. It wasn't just about a missed snapshot. It was the first time I internalized that belonging wasn't a right. It was a privilege others could revoke. But here's what they didn't account for. When you force someone to always hold a camera, they learn to see the world differently. They notice shadows and light, angles and flaws. And sometimes, if they're stubborn enough, they use that knowledge to build a stage where no one can crop them out again. That cheap paper tree costume? It was the last time I'd stand silent in the background. The camera they kept handing me, it became the tool I'd use to redefine my own worth. First through stolen self-portraits, then through a vision no one could ignore. Funny how the thing meant to keep me invisible became the very thing that taught me how to be seen. The silent pattern. Holidays were the worst. Not because of the forced smiles or awkward small talk, but because of what always happened when someone shouted group photo. Like clockwork, I positioned myself at the edge, try and make myself small enough to fit into their idea of perfection. Then came the pause, that split second where the camera would lower, and someone would say, "Wait, let's do one without you first." At first, I laughed it off, pretending it was some inside joke I didn't get. But after years of Thanksgivings, Christmases, and summer barbecues, the pattern became undeniable. My presence was conditional. The worst part? No one ever explained why. Just vague excuses. Your hair was in your face or you moved, as if my very existence made their memories blurry. I started studying those photos they kept, searching for what made me so disposable. Was it my posture? My clothes? The way my happiness never looked quite like theirs? Then came the year I tried an experiment. I stopped joining the photos altogether. No one noticed. They just kept posing, kept smiling, kept memorializing moments I wasn't meant to be part of. That's when I realized it wasn't about how I looked in pictures. It was about how I made them feel in real life. Too loud, too quiet, too much, not enough. The camera didn't lie. It just revealed what they already believed. I was optional, but patterns can be broken. Years later, when I started my first business, I noticed something ironic. The same people who cropped me out of memories suddenly wanted front row seats to my success. They didn't understand that life isn't about begging for inclusion in someone else's frame. It's about building your own damn gallery. Those holiday photos they treasured, they're collecting dust in some attic now. But the life I built after walking away, that's displayed everywhere they can't ignore. The digital erasure. The discovery happened at 2:37 a.m. during one of those sleepless nights when your fingers move faster than your thoughts. I was scrolling through old Facebook albums on my cousin's profile when I saw them. Vacation photos from Hawaii that I distinctly remembered being in. There I was in the originals, smiling awkwardly in my too bright sundress at the luau, squinting against the sunset of the beach, my arm around my sister near the waterfall. Except now, in these uploaded versions, I was gone, not just untagged, physically erased. Someone had taken the time to meticulously crop me out or use editing tools to remove me completely, leaving only suspicious blank spaces where my body should have been. The worst was the group shot where my hand remained on my sister's shoulder. Just a hand, floating there like some grotesque phantom limb. I clicked through 12 different photos, each surgical removal more precise than the last. This wasn't some accidental oversight. It was a coordinated effort. I confronted my sister the next day, and her response still echoes in my bones. "Oh, those? Mom said you looked tired in them. We thought you prefer it this way." That moment crystallized the truth. My existence in their lives was like a Photoshop layer. They could toggle on and off at will. What they didn't realize was that digital footprints are permanent. I still had the originals in my email, proof that I had been there, that I was real. Those doctored photos became my turning point. If they were willing to rewrite history so brazenly, then I would create a present so undeniable that no amount of digital manipulation could erase me. Years later, when Forbes interviewed me, they asked for personal photos to accompany the piece. I sent them those original Hawaii pictures, complete with my awkward smile and too bright sundress, along with a simple caption. Some people try to crop you out of their story, make your own story too big to cut. The excuses, the justifications came wrapped in different packaging each time, but they all carried the same toxic message. You're too tall for the composition at my cousin's wedding, where they positioned me behind a potted plant that conveniently blocked my entire body. You blinked at the wrong moment. During my grandfather's birthday, though the 5 retakes they took still somehow didn't include me in the final selection. The lighting makes you look washed out, became code for we don't want your darkness in our highlight reel. I collected these excuses like morbid souvenirs, each one another paper cut to my self-worth. The most creative one came during our family reunion when my uncle said, "The camera adds 10 pounds, and you're perfect as you are," while physically steering me away from the group shot. What hurt most wasn't the lies themselves, but how effortlessly they flowed, like they'd rehearsed these explanations in the mirror. After a while, I started noticing the pattern. The excuses only work one way. When my brother blinked, they'd say it made the photo authentic. When my sister was backlit, they called it artistic. But my mere presence became a technical difficulty to solve. The breaking point came when I found a dozen rejected takes of our last family Christmas photo. In every single one where I looked happy and natural, someone had their eyes closed or an awkward expression. Yet the perfect version they framed was one where I was mid-sneeze, face contorted, while everyone else beamed flawlessly. That's when I realized they weren't excuses, they were weapons. Each reason was another way to say you don't belong here without actually saying it. But here's what they failed to understand. Every time they handed me another flimsy justification, they were unknowingly giving me another reason to build a life where my presence wasn't up for debate. Years later, when photographers at Forbes directed me during my cover shoot, I recognized the same technical terms. Watch the lighting, mind your posture, don't blink. But this time, they weren't excuses to exclude me. They were instructions to make me shine. And when that issue hit newsstand with my face perfectly framed, I finally understood the problem was never how I photographed. It was who held the camera, the breaking point. It was my aunt's casual shrug that finally shattered the illusion. At 19, after a lifetime of being airbrushed out of family memories, I mustered the courage to ask why during another photo shoot where I'd been relegated to photographer duty. Her response came without hesitation or remorse. "You just don't fit the aesthetic," for words that explained everything and nothing simultaneously. The room didn't spin, my vision didn't blur. The world simply snapped into terrible focus. This wasn't about bad lighting or unfortunate timing. This was a deliberate curation of reality where I was deemed visually incompatible with their perfect family narrative. I remember staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror that night, searching for whatever flaw made me aesthetically unworthy. Was it my nose? My posture? The way my smile crinkled unevenly? The truth was far more devastating. There was nothing wrong with me. I simply didn't match the imaginary ideal they constructed. That moment became my personal Rubicon. I realized all those years of shrinking myself, of standing at the edges, of holding my breath, hoping to earn a spot in the frame, had been wasted on people who saw me as a stylistic inconvenience rather than family. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd spent years carefully composing images of happiness while destroying the real thing. That night, I made 2 promises to myself. I would never again beg to be included in someone else's picture, and I would create a life so vibrant that no one could question my place in it. When I packed my bags the next morning, no one stopped to take a photo. But that empty frame became the most important picture of all, the one where I finally saw myself clearly enough to walk away. Years later, when Forbes stylists fussed over my aesthetic before the cover shoot, I smiled at the cosmic justice. The same quality that made me unfit for family albums. My inability to conform to their narrow vision became the exact reason they wanted me on their cover. My difference was no longer a flaw to crop out, but a signature to highlight. The escape, the silence when I left was louder than any goodbye could have been. No dramatic confrontations, no tearful pleas to stay, just the quiet click of a front door closing for the last time, echoing through a house full of people who didn't bother looking up from their phones. I'd packed my life into 2 suitcases and a backpack, each item a conscious choice about what parts of myself were worth carrying forward. The bus ticket in my pocket cost $28.50, the exact price of my freedom from a family album that never had space for me. Those first nights in a rented room with peeling wallpaper and a mattress on the floor should have felt like rock bottom, but there was an unexpected lightness to the emptiness. For the first time, the walls weren't decorated with photos I wasn't in. The shelves didn't hold frames where I'd been cropped out. My new reality was raw and unfiltered and entirely mine. I remember staring at the blank walls of that tiny room and realizing with startling clarity, this emptiness wasn't exclusion. It was potential. Every stain on the carpet, every crack in the ceiling represented something profound, a space where I could exist unedited. The loneliness was brutal at times, but it was an honest brutality, not the slow poison pretending to belong where I wasn't wanted. I started taking self-portraits with a thrift store camera, not because I needed proof I existed, but because I wanted to document what real belonging looked like, imperfect, uncurated, and uncompromising. Those grainy photos became the first pages of a new family album where the only aesthetic that mattered was authenticity. When the loneliness threatened to swallow me whole, I'd look at those self-portraits and remember, it's better to be fully seen alone than forever hidden in a crowd. Years later, when I walked past that same bus station on my way to the Forbes photo shoot, I realized the most important journey wasn't the physical distance I traveled, but the psychological space I created between who they told me I was and who I decided to become. The girl who left with 2 suitcases and a broken heart didn't disappear. She simply outgrew the frames they tried to confine her to. The rebuilding, the fluorescent lights of the 24-hour diner became my new sun. The cracked vinyl booth my office, as I juggled 3 jobs that barely covered rent. Waitressing by day, data entry by night, and weekends spent selling handmade jewelry at flea markets. Each shift another brick in the foundation of life where no one could erase me again. I learned to exist on stolen moments of sleep and dollar menu meals. My hands always moving, always working towards something I couldn't quite name yet. The jewelry business started as desperation, stringing beads between customer orders at the diner, but became my first lesson in visibility. Each piece I created carried a secret message. The chokers with hidden clasps represented how I'd learned to protect myself. The asymmetrical earrings symbolized how imbalance could become intentional design. Strangers began recognizing my work at the market, pointing at my table saying that's the artist, words that sent electric shocks through my system. For the first time, I was being identified not by my absence, but by what I created with my own hands. The jewelry money bought my first laptop, which became my passport to a world where skills mattered more than bloodlines. YouTube tutorials replaced family dinners as I taught myself graphic design. Each new technique another weapon against the helplessness they conditioned me to accept. My tiny apartment filled with sketchbooks of ideas too big for my current life. Pages overflowing with logos, business plans, and product designs that kept me awake with possibility. The hunger wasn't just financial. It was creative starvation finally being fed. I existed in a constant state of exhaustion and exhilaration, collapsing into bed each night with sore feet and ink-stained hands, yet more alive than I'd ever been, surrounded by relatives who treated me like a photobomb in their perfect lives. Those grueling months forged an unshakable truth. Being valued for what you can do rather than who you're related to is the most powerful kind of belonging. The market stall became my business cards, the diner counter my networking events, and every customer who complimented my work became proof that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who see you clearly enough to pay for what you create. The first win. Failure became my most consistent mentor during those early startup years. The first business collapsed after 11 months when a supplier ran off of my investment, leaving me with boxes of worthless materials and maxed out credit cards. The second venture imploded spectacularly when my co-founder quit mid-pitch to investors. But with each crash came unexpected clarity. I was learning what not to build, who not to trust, how not to think. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a 3 a.m. brainstorming session in my studio apartment, surrounded by crumpled paper and half-empty coffee cups. I realized all my previous ideas had been attempts to create something impressive rather than something authentic. That night, I designed a jewelry line based on my own story. Pieces that celebrated imperfection, with intentionally asymmetrical designs and raw, unfinished edges. The collection's tagline was brutally honest, for those who don't fit the frame. When the first orders trickled in from strangers who connected with that message, something shifted. These weren't just customers. They were people who saw their own struggles reflected in my work. A boutique owner in Portland emailed saying my pieces flew off her shelves because they tell the truth. That validation sparked an important realization. Being excluded had given me a superpower. I could spot the emotional voids in the market because I'd lived them. My third company wasn't built on business school principles, but on raw human need. The universal craving to be seen as we truly are. When sales hit 6 figures in 9 months, it wasn't the money that stunned me, though paying rent on time felt miraculous. It was a flood of customer testimonials from people who said my designs made them feel visible for the first time. Their stories mirror my own in ways that still my hands when reading them. The woman who bought a necklace after a divorce to reclaim her identity. The teenager who wore my earrings despite the bullies who mocked his style. Each message was another thread in the safety net I've been building since childhood. Proof that belonging could be chosen rather than inherited. The real victory wasn't the bank balance or media features. It was finally understanding why those family photos had never included me. They needed me out of frame so they could maintain the illusion of perfection. But the world was hungry for truth, the validation. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning with a subject line that made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. Forbes 30 under 30 consideration. At first I assumed it was spam, the kind of cruel joke the universe might play after years of rejection. But as I read the legitimate request for an interview and portfolio submission, a peculiar calm settled over me. This wasn't the giddy excitement I'd imagined for career milestones. It was the quiet certainty of a puzzle piece clicking into place. Preparing my submission became an archaeological dig through my own transformation, from those early flea market jewelry designs to the sleek product lines now stocked in major retailers. The reporter's questions during our interview kept circling back to my unique brand narrative, and it struck me that what made my story compelling was precisely what my family had tried to crop out: the raw edges, the visible seams, the unvarnished truth of becoming. When the photographer arrived for the cover shoot, I instinctively positioned myself at the edge of the frame before stopping myself. For the first time in my life, I was the focal point, the center of composition. The stylist's offhand comment, "We're doing bold looks because your features can handle the drama," landed like poetic justice after years of being told I wasn't photogenic. As the makeup artist darkened my brows and the photographer adjusted the lighting, I realized this moment wasn't just about business success. It was about visibility on my own terms. The cover image they ultimately selected showed me mid-laugh, my uneven smile fully displayed rather than concealed, the crinkles around my eyes unmistakably present. When the digital proof arrived, I stared at it for 20 uninterrupted minutes, tracing the journey from excluded to celebrated. That image contained multitudes. The little girl left out of family photos, the teenager cropped from digital albums, the young woman who nearly believed their excuses. But most importantly, it held the person they never saw coming, the one who turned their rejection into her greatest strength. Forbes didn't make me successful. It simply documented what already existed. And unlike those carefully curated family albums, this time there will be no edits, no cropping, no erasures. Just the truth in focus. The irony. The notifications started flooding in before dawn on publication day. Dozens of messages from numbers I hadn't heard from in years. All variations on the same theme. We always knew you'd do great things. My phone buzzed relentlessly with newfound pride from relatives who couldn't remember my birthday for 2 decades. Social media told a real story. Suddenly I was tagged in every possible old family photo where I appear marginally in the background, captured with things like our shining star and proud family moment. The cognitive dissonance was almost impressive. The same people who once airbrushed me from memories now jostling to claim credit for my success. A particularly bold cousin even posted my Forbes cover alongside childhood pictures they'd previously excluded me from, as if we'd shared some unbreakable bond all along. The messages grew more desperate as the article went viral. Voicemails about family reunions I must attend. Invitations to holidays that had always been closed to me before. What they didn't understand was that their sudden interest only confirmed what I'd known all along. Their affection had always been conditional on my usefulness to their narrative. The final twist came when my mother texted asking for signed copies of the magazine to show my friends, the same hands that had once cropped me out now eager to display me like a trophy. I responded by mailing her a single issue with one alteration, a red marker circling every empty space in the family photos she'd sent over years. The spots where I should have been. No note, no explanation. Just the silent evidence of their choices contrasted against the undeniable reality of my presence now. Their hunger for reflected glory revealed the tragic hollowness of their perfect family album, because real legacy isn't about curating flawless images, but embracing imperfect people. The cover didn't change my past, but it did something more important. It exposed theirs. And as the congratulatory messages kept pouring in from people who'd once treated me as invisible, I realized the sweetest revenge wasn't refusing their praise, but accepting it gracefully, while knowing none of them could claim even an inch of my journey. The frame had finally flipped. Where they once decided if I belonged in their pictures, I now held absolute power over whether they belonged in my life. The cover wasn't revenge. It was proof. I existed. I mattered. And no one could airbrush that away. Exclusion leaves scars, but also gives you a choice. Believe their narrative or write your own. I spent years begging for a spot in their frames, until I realized I didn't need their album. I could make my own. Every late night, every rejection, every "you don't fit here" fueled me. And when Forbes put me on that cover, it wasn't just a win. It was a receipt. Proof that I was always enough, just not for them. If you're the cropped out one, remember, your value isn't decided by who includes you. It's defined by what you create without them. Build something undeniable. Let them see you where they least expect it. And when they finally do, don't give them the satisfaction of pretending they knew you all along. If this hit home, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories about turning rejection into fuel. And remember, your story isn't over because someone left you out of a chapter. The world will try to crop you out. Don't let it shrink you down.